John, lovely to meet you. And I was drawn to your profile on LinkedIn where it says you're the good product guy. So, can you tell me what is a good product? What makes a good product?
Well, that's a good thing. That's a good question. I think the biggest thing that people often, I can tell you what makes a bad product, and maybe we can work backwards from there. Often people ignore who they're building it for. So if you're building something, you need to make sure that you're actually building something that solves a problem. So typically, people kind of ignore speaking to users, speaking to people who they're trying to build something for. They ignore the kind of commercial aspect is quite a common thing. So there's a lot of kind of art and creativeness that goes into building something from scratch, but people think it's pure art and pure creativity and then ignore the business side. So it's striking that balance of making something new, but having the commercial constraints, being aware of that. But those are the two kind of biggest things. If you're building something and listening to people and taking on board the problems that they have, you can't really go too wrong. There's always an element of risk on stuff, but that would be the key thing. But my take is very kind of on an ethical standpoint as well. So I like to kind of focus on good people and work with people who have kind of a more moral, ethical kind of standing in what they're doing. And there's an other element of good product that kind of goes to that. You're building something that's not hurting people. You're building something that actually makes the world a better place. It's not just an advertising platform in big tech sort of thing. So yeah, that's kind of a roundabout way of explaining the good product side of things.
So, does an ethical product sacrifice some of the profit that it would ordinarily make in order to do good for society? Is it possible to be profitable and good?
Definitely. And that's actually what kind of took me into my fractional route. So a lot of the companies that I've worked with big organizations and I've worked with small organizations. A lot of the big organizations have the capabilities, the resources to spend a lot on individual people to run big teams and things. And a lot of the opportunity kind of come from my work, at least on the fractional side of things, comes from the fact that you don't necessarily need all of these roles. You don't need somebody to own all of these things. It's kind of a more old fashioned way of thinking about it. And especially with like AI capabilities and things like that, it's not, a magic bullet, but it makes a lot of jobs easier. So you don't need so many people in your teams, which makes it cheaper. And often a lot of third sector, so, you've got kind of charities or government organizations and things like that, they don't have so much money to play with. So it's like, how can they still have the same impact without spending so much? Obviously, that works for big commercial companies as well, but they usually kind of just go with the status quo of like, well, we'll just hire, what everyone else does. But yeah, working with smaller organizations puts those constraints on, and then you kind of have to think, okay, how can we still deliver something that's impactful for the world, positive for the world, whilst still being commercially viable? So it's, you're not neglecting certain bits. So it's kind of having a generalist overview of things rather than just deep diving. So that's the approach that I've been trying to bring to companies. And that seems to resonate quite nicely with more ethical companies generally. But just because you're good doesn't mean that you are going to be less profitable. In fact, I think B Corps generally, so I'm a B Corp as of 2025, early 2025. So B Corps are people that are commit or organizations. Usually, it's just myself currently in company, but a B Corp is an organization that puts people over profit. Let's say. So
Right.
within the kind of process of becoming a B Corp certifying, you have to make sure that you're meeting certain standards of, you're being conscious about who you're hiring. Not such a problem for me at the moment, but you have to make sure that you're aware of like certain kind of what kind of energy you're using, how you're disposing of things within the business, all that kind of stuff. And B Corps generally are more profitable and they have a longer lifespan. But yeah, so basically they generally do better and they survive longer and they have longer relationships with their customers, their clients, and it's just a better thing for the planet. So yeah, that's basically what it is.
Let's dig into the whole fractional bit for a moment then. So, the way you sold that to me was basically you can go into an organization and basically do the work of a team for a fraction of the cost of what it would cost that team. So does that mean that you're doing more things? Are you working harder because you're having to cover the entire team as a one-man band? Or does it mean that you're basically more efficient at what you do because you know exactly what's meant to happen? There's obviously an advantage there for the people who hire you, because I presume that means if they hire you, it means they don't need to take on a huge team. But how does that work for you? Are you just working ridiculous hours or what? How does it work?
It comes down to efficiency. So a lot of the old way of thinking, and it comes from the big tech mentality where people would chuck, VCs, private equity, whoever, big banks, anyone would chuck money at big tech. And the teams that would get spun up were usually quite big because they could afford to do it. So you'd have your scrum master, you'd have your product owner, multiple product owners in some cases, you'd have multiple engineers of varying levels, you'd have multiple, just loads of different people all doing an overlap of what they kind of needed to do. So over the past few years, I've seen the companies that do best have much, much smaller teams, smaller squads, but they focus on collaborating and everyone sharing the understanding of kind of commercial constraints and user constraints and engineering constraints from day one. You start a project with an idea, and the engineers, the product people, the designers are all on board, and they all go on that same journey together. And it's not siloed like it used to be. It's not that kind of horrible waterfall, and it's not like agile, which it's just people getting together and just talking and working out, problem solving. It's so obvious, so simple, but not many people do it because they have the expectation that you need to have 6, 7, 8 people within this product team for it to be successful. And a lot of teams I've gone into, and they're spending 700-800K a year on these things that don't even remotely move the needle on profit, let alone revenue. Like, everyone always talks about revenue, but it's profit at the end of the day. You kind of want to be making money. So you spend 800K on something on these big teams, and the delivery is very minimal. So my approach is all about keeping things quite general, making sure that you're hiring the right people and bringing them in on that journey from day one, from idea to the end, and making sure keeping mindful of the user constraints. So talking to humans, talking, not looking at data and all this kind of other stuff, but just talking to people, being mindful of how much things cost. Every hour that an engineer, a product person, a designer is spent on something costs the business. That's fact. That's how business works. And if you keep those two things in mind and then say, we need to make more money than this by 2x or 3x or however much, everyone's on board. So it works really well. So the way that I work, yeah, I come in and talk to people, try and get that alignment. Once you start getting that, it does just kind of run itself, and it, needs nudging, it needs a bit of human interaction. But then it's usually the case of, oh, actually, can we spin up another squad? Can we do that again? But maybe we'll build something else. And so that's often what happens. But it's substantially cheaper, and it's just something that people haven't done yet. And I don't, there's not really a logical reason. I think it's just status quo. That's just how people do things the old way. So it's trying something new and seeing what works. And so far, it's worked for my clients,
Okay.
big and small.
So are you an engineer by trade? Is that how you got into this consultancy role?
No, so my background is actually in more product design. I started many, many, many years ago hacking apart WordPress websites to make money. So I used to, get somebody on board saying I need a website, and then it would be, okay, cool. I'll play with some PHP and some dodgy CSS and things, and try and get the thing that they wanted. So I early on was like, I'm not an engineer, but I understand the engineering kind of constraints on stuff, and I like just making things. So I was like, okay, this is good. And then as time went on, I realized that actually there's a lot of the value. Everyone always hires big engineering teams, but a lot of the value comes from understanding what people actually need to build before it gets to be built. So I was originally in kind of design and making websites and things, platforms, and then it kind of shifted into owning the product side of things. So it was like taking on more complicated bits and bobs and having a bit more breadth of what I was kind of responsible for. Um, and then more recently, it's been making sure that engineering, product design, whoever, commercial, senior leadership teams, it's having that alignment, but also still being very hands on. I'm not an engineer, but my understanding of how engineering pipelines work, how DevOps works, how you need to do certain things and work in certain ways, and you can't just build everything in a day. Like, I know theory behind stuff, but I'm not an expert on like actually coding. But fortunately, there's people who are very passionate and good at doing that. But the value that I bring is making sure that everything that gets built is done correctly, and making sure that it gets built as quickly and as efficiently as possible, delivering something that's impactful.
So if someone's watching this and they're, in their 20s, they can code, they've done some some website work, and they're thinking with AI and everything, the way the world's changing, this sounds like a really good way to actually sort of future-proof my career, because if I'm the person that's always fixing things and doing the communication with humans, I'm always going to be needed. Is it, how do they get into it? How do you make a start in getting into the world of being a fractional consultant for good products?
So I think the best thing is building your network. So you need to have people who need these kind of services and trust you to do the job. But if you're coming from an engineering background, I'd say that one of the most useful things that you can do is start talking to the users of your product. The most successful engineers that I've seen have, lone wolves that just sit in their room all day and don't talk to anyone. They are very collaborative. They're very keen to understand why somebody is doing something, and they're kind of personable. So skilling up as an engineer, those kind of three things would give a lot of value to your career. And that's the difference. I've recently been doing hiring, and that's the difference between when we're looking at senior and lead people, or even kind of junior and senior people. It's always around, I hate the term soft skills, but that's what people call it. But it's those skills of just being able to like interact with people and communicate. And that's very, very important. Like we're still humans at the end of the day. So no matter how much money, billions, trillions, whatever gets thrown at AI, we're still humans that have to talk to each other at the end of the day. So if you can get good at finding out what problems people have on a human level, I
Mm.
can't access my bank account in because there's no Wi-Fi. I can't grow my plants correctly. So, it's those kind of things that it's like, okay, if you talk to people, find out what their actual problems are, and then just build the solution for them because you're smart and you're good and you're good at building things in a sensible way. And then you can talk to them again and say, okay, right, this is what I've got. How do I do, how am I doing? And they're like, oh, I could do that a little bit differently or whatever. Cool. Okay, sweet. That's how things get built. That's how things used to get built. And then there's this kind of big, like in the finance world, everything's overly complicated just to make people feel like they're dumb and they don't know what's going on. But it's not hard. You just need to talk to people and build solutions to their problems that they're kind of highlighting. So
Sure.
yeah, that's it really. I think, and the best thing is just to get out there and start talking to people, start building things and start building your network. So all of my work comes from people that I know, or people that I've kind of gone out and, went to an event or introduced myself to people or whatnot. So yeah.
So how, on any one moment, how many clients would you say you've got? How many can you work with in a week?
The sweet spot for me is two, which doesn't sound very adventurous, but I personally like to have ideally quite a nice big project or a bigger, chunkier project, and something that's maybe a little bit more, ongoing. So
Mm.
currently I'm working with a company, a startup that's doing something quite interesting around how data gets used for sales purposes. It's very kind of luxury service area sort of thing. So it's quite an interesting world to be in because you're dealing with very big names, big brands and things like that. But a lot of the team that I'm working with is finding time where they can kind of do things, and everything is self-funded. So it's a lot of the team are just putting in as much energy as they possibly can outside of their normal day-to-day jobs, which is amazing. So that's one side of it. And then the other side is that kind of more commercial, um, somebody's got some cash that they want to throw at something and they want to try and get these ideas out as quickly as possible. And I think it's a different game to be playing, but that's the kind of balance that I like, and that seems to work quite well. So you've got like the security blanket of the fact that you've got something that's a little bit more ongoing, or you've got those kind of clients that see you through 3 6 months and maybe 2 or 3 days a week, and then you've got that one thing or that longer term project that it's a bit of a gamble, or you might see how it goes. And then over time it's like, well, actually you don't need me for the next 6 months, but you might need me for like one day a month just to kind of keep checking in and make sure that things tick over. And that's quite a good relationship for both parties. Then that works well.
So when they kind of mature, I suppose, once they've matured to a point where their product is in the market, it's doing well, do they no longer need you, or is there an evolution to the sort of the consultancy, or is it sometimes okay to just shake hands and walk away and say we did a great job, and I'm here if you need me in the future? Is that sometimes how it works?
Yeah, definitely. So I've worked with a client where it was an exercise of getting their product and engineering teams up to scratch. So hiring and making sure that they had everyone in that mindset, like I explained, you have a squad, everyone is on board from start to finish of like exactly what the idea is and how they do that. So it's building the squads and building the team so that it reflects that, highlighting that they need to have a permanent person in. So, you know, you can have me as a somebody who kind of just drops in once every couple of weeks or whatnot, or you can have me somebody full time, or you can have me in, you know, halfway. But it sounds like in some instances it's better to have somebody who is a permanent employee because of however they want to grow or whatever their needs are, and that's kind of how it works. So I personally like it when a project has gone very well, and then it's like we don't need your services anymore. Off you go, and I'm like, that's fine. I don't like it when it ends and it's like, you know, that hasn't gone so well, and we don't want you anymore. That's not such a nice situation to be in. But fortunately, that doesn't happen very often at all.
Or like
So
a really bad date where you don't know how you both of you don't want to really say it's a bad date, but
you
you
don't
just
want to end. Yeah, exactly.
I'll call you in a week. Yeah. Okay. Cool. More. I noticed on your website that you have a little line there saying the personal London touch. Do you think geography still matters in this remote world that we're in today? Does it add some credibility to be able to say that you have the personal London touch or not?
Sadly, yes, I think it does. And I say sadly because I think it would be great if it was a true meritocracy and everyone was completely equal on their skills or whatnot. But I do think geography makes a difference. The reality is that actually you do build very strong relationships with people face to face capacity, and it's a lot easier. You can read body language, you can see how things develop as well. You know, you go and grab a coffee and then it's like you just keep chatting and it's like, well, actually, I'll walk you back to the station, or why don't we catch up next week, sort of thing, or let's go climbing or something. You know, it's like you never know how kind of things develop, but that doesn't mean that it's impossible. It just I do think it gives you it can be advantageous, and I'm incredibly fortunate that I live in like one of the best cities in the world in London. But yeah, I think from my point of view, there's value in the fact that I can go in, I can speak to people.
So, John, if someone's watching this and thinking, I could really use this guy in my team, I really like the idea of taking a consultant on a fractional basis. What gets you excited these days? What kind of projects would you be interested in, and how could they get you on their team, and what could you do for them?
The projects that I like to work, the problems that I like to solve are people that have ideas and they want to deliver them as quickly as possible. And I mean like product ideas, like, you know, there's a problem that they're trying to solve for a customer, hopefully a commercial kind of reason behind it. Usually the people that I like to work with are quite visionary. So it's, you know, CEOs generally have like 2, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year plans on stuff. And it's like bringing them back down to earth of just being like, okay, right, what can we do in the next 3 months that gets you as close to that as possible? So those are the types of projects that I like, but it's going from idea to we have something that actually is profitable as quickly as possible is what I like. I don't like projects where it's kind of like, oh, in 2 or 3 years' time, we might have something that generates revenue. It's not that. It's trying to get something that feels like, okay, it's actually having an impact on the real world. People are willing to hand over their actual cash into our bank accounts to buy this thing right now. To me, that's how it should be. That's how business should be. There's a growing pool of people that have a focus on building things that are better for humanity. They shouldn't be limited by the fact they think, okay, I need to have £1 million in VC funding to build my idea. No, you don't. You really don't. You just need to make sure that you've got somebody who's really talented at building stuff, like engineering wise, and somebody who's good at the product side. So often I'm brought in on the product side. If you've got the engineering teams or you've got the engineers that can do that, or if you need help, I can help with that. It's bringing the humanity back to technology, really, making it a little bit simpler.
Okay. All right. It's been fascinating to talk to you. I've really, really taken an awful lot from hearing different side of the digital world that I'm used to. The fact that you can actually get involved in projects on a fractional level, it's kind of new to me. I hope that there's probably people who can take from this the idea that maybe the fractional life is a really good one, is a good way of actually getting involved in lots of different projects. I like the idea, the fact that you can get up on a different day and do a different project and work for somebody
Mm.
else. That sounds really
Mm.
cool to me. And I'm sure there's loads of people who think that's a pretty cool way to earn a living. So it's been great to get a flavor of your world. And I wish you all the very best with it.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's been a delight chatting with you.